He executed a move that's taught by every offensive coach in America. You know what this is all about, don't you? That's right. BCS. That's what made a difference today in the game. That's what made a difference in the call in front of their bench. Dollar signs.
Yes, Mangino and his so-called blow-up at the end of the Texas-Kansas game from 6 years ago will hardly be forgotten anytime soon, and neither will Mark Mangino. Even though he's no longer the head coach at Kansas, he did help Kansas become relevant in college football. Another reason why I showed the clip, if you noticed, yes, he did cut the officials down. That's obvious. He felt like the officiating was a big reason why Texas won, all motivated by the BCS, because Texas was in BCS contention at the time, and he felt that by Texas winning the game, it basically kept them alive for a BCS bid, which would mean that the Big 12 champion, Oklahoma and Texas, would get BCS bids, which would mean more money for the conference, yes, dollar signs. Now, do I believe Mangino in his theory? Not really. But you can kind of understand where he was coming from. Not only the fact that he felt that his team got job, but he felt that Kansas was not being respected. He wanted Kansas football to be relevant on a national scale. He didn't want his team just to have a good moral showing against the Longhorns. He wanted to win and win badly, and he wanted his team to be on a level equivalent to that. 3 years later, Kansas would get their wish, and they would rise to national prominence, finishing that year in the top 10, 12-1 record, a BCS bid, yes, dollar signs, finally, for Mangino, and an Orange Bowl victory over Virginia Tech. The magic ride in Lawrence, Kansas, as I would call it 3 years ago, the 12-1 season, a season that will never be forgotten in Jayhawk football history. The following year, they were okay, but not great, 8-5. And then last year, after winning their first 5 games and getting all the way up to number 16 in the country, people in Lawrence might have been thinking about 2007 all over again. But they lost their last 7 games, didn't go to a bowl game, finished with a losing record, and if that wasn't enough for Mangino to digest, how about accusations, long-time accusations, that he was verbally abusive to his players? I suppose there is a fine line between getting a player motivated and just absolutely degrading him personally, not only him, but his family, taking it too far. That was maybe the biggest factor, and of course the losing 7 in a row didn't help, as to why Mangino was forced out at Kansas. Now, for 2010, you're going to enter Turner Gill, who personality-wise couldn't be more of an opposite. He's not going to cuss in your face in order to get his point across. But the guy can coach. We saw that at the University of Buffalo just recently. Buffalo, one of the worst teams in Division I football. He guided Buffalo to a MAC championship and a bowl appearance. Now, that's coaching right there. Turner Gill, the former Nebraska all-everything quarterback, returns to the heartland, but not to coach at Nebraska, but to coach at a neighboring state and at a rival, the Kansas Jayhawks. At last, Turner Gill, who got turned down for the Auburn head coaching job not too long ago, finally gets to coach, head coach, at a BCS school in Kansas. But the dude's going to earn his money because there are a lot of new people on the Jayhawk roster. Yes, we are going to talk about offense first, and no longer there for Kansas is Todd Reesing, a 3-year starter. He played in that 2007 Orange Bowl winning team. So you're going to have a new guy under center. This is going to be FYI number 1, and that is the new guy at quarterback, and that is Cale Pick. Yes, already that has to give you a little weeble-wobble feeling if you're a Jayhawk fan, because of his last name. Pick, which we all know is an adjective for interception. If you're a Jayhawk fan, hopefully you'll see very few of those, and hopefully you'll see a little more variety from Pick. Last year, when he seldomly played, he only threw 5 passes, did complete 4 of them, but made more of an impact running the ball. If you're a Jayhawk fan, you like to see him run, continue to run, but also you know that the guy cannot just rely on his feet, he's going to have to rely on his arm. It's kind of a good and bad thing for Pick. Has an experienced offensive line in front of him, all 5 starters and the tight end return, but you do lose your top two receivers in Des Briscoe and Kerry Meyer, maybe the best receiving duo in the Big 12 a year ago. That's, of course, debatable. But still, for Pick, he knows that it's going to be pretty tough without those two guys to throw to. Turner Gill and that coaching staff, that new coaching staff, led by offensive coordinator Chuck Long, or as Oklahoma Sooner fans like to call him, Chuck Third and Long, he used to be an offensive coordinator in Soonerland. They know that they're going to have to be patient with this guy. He's not going to be Todd Reesing. The one thing that Reesing did so well at Kansas is he improvised very well. He was able to get out of tight situations more times than not. I don't know if you can teach a quarterback, or any player for that matter, to improvise, to think quick. I think that has to come from within. The development of Kale Pick is going to be something to watch in Kansas this season. They're also going to be balanced in the backfield. A little bit of power, but a lot of speed. And that would include a guy like Deshaun Sands. And when I first heard this name, of course, I'm old school. Been watching football since the 80s. First thought that came to my mind, could Deshaun be the son of Tony Sands? If you watched Big 8 football back in the day on Raycom Sports, if you lived in the Kansas area, you, of course, know his dad, Tony Sands. Yes, father and son. Tony, I remember one time, had a huge rushing game against Missouri. I think he rushed for close to 400 yards. Sands was a fine running back, no doubt, in Lawrence. And now his son hopes to carry that name and hopes to aid the Jayhawks. One guy to remember if you're a Jayhawk fan, and that is Brandon Bourbon. Brandon Bourbon was the Missouri High School Player of the Year just recently. Now he's a Jayhawk. And I don't think this guy's going to redshirt. I think that they will use him, and if he meets all the hype, they'll probably use him more than they will the other three backs. So remember the name Brandon Bourbon. As Dick Vitale might say, he's a diaper dandy. Key number 2 for the Kansas Jayhawks are going to be the wideouts. We mentioned earlier, you don't have Kerry Meyer, a serviceable guy, his entire career at Kansas, and you don't have Des Briscoe. So, you lose your top 2 wideouts, you have to replace them, and you're going to replace them with the guy who was the number 3 guy last year, who should be the number 1 guy this year, and that's Jonathan Wilson. Wilson, along with Bradley McDougald, now have to be the new 1-2 punch for Kale Pick. And you're not going to be able to expect these guys to be like Des Briscoe and Kerry Meyer, just because last year's quarterback Todd Reesing knew them so well. They had chemistry, the quarterback and those 2 receivers. Now you're blending in a new quarterback, 2 wideouts. Chemistry sometimes takes time. Sometimes you get lucky with chemistry and it develops fast, and sometimes chemistry never develops. Sometimes it's just something in the air. The wide receiver position has to make you a little bit nervous if you're Kansas. Now, can Wilson and McDougald be admirable guys for Kansas? Of course they can be, but you can't expect them to be Meyer and Briscoe because of all those games, all that experience, all those touchdowns and catches that they amassed, okay? They earn that respect. We'll see if Wilson and we'll see if McDougald can do likewise. In fact, maybe the best receiver is the tight end, and that's Tim Berry, who has an opportunity, I think, to be all Big 12 first team entering this season. The guy has terrific hands, and the guy is not afraid of contact. If you're a tight end, you can't be. The guy's been known to barrel down defenders. So Tim Berry, he's a pretty good one for the Jayhawks. And as I mentioned, you have all the offensive linemen back. This offensive line was not stellar a year ago. The ground game was average, okay? They gained a little over 13 yards on the ground. That's not very good. That's barely over 100 yards total a game. So these guys, hopefully during the offseason, have worked out for the Jayhawks, and hopefully they can come in improved. At least one guy who I think is going to get a lot of accolades as far as first team All Big 12 goes is going to be Tanner Hawkington. That will be one guy that is already getting preseason All Big 12 hype. So watch for the development of the Kansas offensive line. They're experienced, but last year they didn't exactly pancake block people, and they got to do a better job pass protecting. They gave up over 30 sacks a year ago, and if it weren't for the fact that Todd Reesing was so good at improvising and getting out of the pocket, that sack total could have been over 45. Reesing was that important and experienced of a player that could improvise in those situations. So Kansas knows that there's a lot of room for improvement, but at least the experience is there. FYI, number 3 for the Jayhawks, forced turnovers, please. My goodness, last year the Jayhawks only had 7 interceptions and only had 10 fumble recoveries. Last year the Jayhawks were dead last in the Big 12 in number of interceptions and number of takeaways. They only had 17 takeaways in all. The defense last year did a decent job of not giving up big plays, but unfortunately they did give up a lot of yardage a year ago. They hope that that area has improved immensely. Now Jake Laptab returns. He is a terrific defensive end. I would say that under normal circumstances he would have a great shot at making first or second team all Big 12. I think that highly of him. But this conference is full of great defensive ends. Jeremy Beal of Oklahoma, Sam Acho of Texas, Alden Smith of Missouri, as well as Pierre Allen of Nebraska, and Hugo Chinasa of Oklahoma State. So Laptab might have a difficult time making it to the top of the all Big 12 defensive end list. But still, that shouldn't stop him from having another good year, both run stopping and getting to the quarterback. He's going to need help, though. If he doesn't, obviously, offenses are going to focus on him, and he can expect to see double teams, and that will really make life difficult for the Kansas front seven as well as for the secondary. Speaking of the secondary, gone is all Big 12 standout. That's the safety, Darrell Stuckey. You lose a valuable one right there. But one valuable guy, I think, at least one valuable guy coming back for the Jayhawks is going to be Chris Harris, whom his career has had 29 starts. So no lack of experience at the corner, and Chris Harris will probably now be expected to lead that Jayhawks secondary. Focusing on non-conference first, the first week should be a gift. North Dakota State comes to Lawrence, Kansas, obviously a win for the Jayhawks. September 11th is going to be a whole lot different as defending ACC champion Georgia Tech and their fine quarterback Josh Nesbitt visit KU. Even though Jonathan Dwyer's not there, they're a great running back, the Yellow Jackets still are a more talented team and should be able to handle Kansas. That'll be a loss for the Jayhawks. At Southern Miss, I have as either or. Larry Fedora is an offensive mind. This one could be a high-scoring game. Either or in this one, that will be on a Friday night on September 17th. Then the Jayhawks close out their non-conference schedule at home against the New Mexico State Aggies. Should be a victory for the Jayhawks. Then if you look at the conference schedule, Oklahoma, Texas, and Texas Tech are 3 much-needed omissions for Turner Gill in his first year. So if KU can enter conference play at 3-1, KU might be talking bowl game. October 2nd, you open up at Baylor. Certainly a winnable game, but it is on the road. Then you get 2 weeks to get ready for your Sunflower State game against Kansas State. Last year, the Wildcats edged out the Jayhawks by a touchdown, but this year's game is in Lawrence, either or. The following week, you get high-scoring Texas A&M visiting Lawrence. Too much A&M in this one. Their offense is going to be too hard for KU to contain. It's not a good matchup at all. The Aggies to win. October 30th is a game at Iowa State against the Cyclones. Can't ever take any game for granted, but KU will have a good shot at winning this one. I can't guarantee it, though, because it's on the road, and I'll go either or. November 6th, the Colorado Buffaloes will visit Kansas. This one either or. Big break on the schedule there for the Jayhawks. They don't have to visit the high altitude of Boulder. November 13th, a bit of a homecoming for Turner Gill as Kansas travels to Lincoln, Nebraska to face the Cornhuskers, and you can bet that Nebraska will give Turner Gill a pretty loud and pretty long round of applause. And then after that, it'll be a one-sided game. Nebraska to roll. November 20th is an either-or game against Oklahoma State, who's rebuilding. So that one I have as a toss-up. November 27th, Kansas and Missouri will play in Kansas City at Arrowhead Stadium. Missouri too loaded on offense and too many defensive players coming back. I give Missouri the advantage in that game.